Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the March 10th, 2022 Board Work Session of the Prince George's County Board of Education. Before we begin, I would like to ask everyone to turn off any wireless communication devices to avoid any technical interference with the microphones and taping of the meeting. A Spanish call-in line for the community to call to hear the meeting interpreted live has been established. The number is 508-924-5155. Again, the number is 508-924-5155. And our board member, Saron Luis, will recite this in Spanish for us.
Número en español para interpretación de este meeting de hoy está disponible. El número es 508-924-5155 para recibir interpretación vivo de este meeting esta noche. Gracias.
Gracias. Ms. Ellis, may we have, closed captioning should be available through live YouTube streaming for the deaf and hard of hearing community. For those who are not able to observe now, this meeting is being recorded and information will be on our board webpage. We will now have the roll call by Ms. Ellis.
Everyone. Mrs. Adam Stafford. Here. Ms. Boozer Strother.
Here.
Mr. Saron Ruiz.
Here.
Mrs. Mickens Murray.
Here.
Mr. Montero.
Here.
Mr. Murray. Mr. Thomas.
Here.
Mr. Valentine. Mrs. Williams.
Present.
Dr. Miller.
Present. We will now have board member Montero please lead us in board prayer and pledge of allegiance.
All right, please rise. O God, we pray to administer that which is just in all educational policies. Being ever mindful of your guidance, steer us to action with love, wisdom, and understanding. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Now we will move to the adoption of the agenda for March 10th. For the March 10th board work session. May I have a motion to approve the March 10th board work session agenda?
So moved.
It has been moved. May I have a second?
Second.
It has been moved and second to adopt the agenda for March 10th board work session. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion carries to adopt today's agenda.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
point of clarification. I just got a message that it's not live streaming. Someone just messaged me. Is that? I just want to make sure that the folks in technology know that.
I don't know.
I just want to clarify for them, not for you, but for our technology folks, that it's not live streaming. This is from Aisha just messaged. But continue. I'm just saying, I don't know what to do in the meantime. But it is recording, so those who can watch it after, if they're not live.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Mr. Burnett is going to take care of that. Now, may I have a motion to approve the meeting minutes for February 24th board meeting?
So moved.
Second.
It has been moved in second to approve the minutes for February 24th, 2022. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries to approve the meeting minutes for February 24th, 2022. Board member recommendation, Operations, Budget, and Fiscal Affairs Committee. Ms. Belinda Queen, who represented District 6 as an elected board member, officially resigned Monday, March 7, 2022, after serving on the Board of Education since December 2018. During her term, Ms. Queen has served as a member, vice chair, and chair of the board's standing committee, Operations, Budget, and Fiscal Affairs. On behalf of my colleagues, we thank Ms. Queen for her services and wish her success in future endeavors. Per board policy 8100, each Board of Education Standing Committee must have at least 4 board members. With the recent resignation of Ms. Queen, the Operations, Budget, and Fiscal Affairs Committee was left with 3 members, and Mr. Board Member Curtis Valentine has been asked to serve on that committee so that we would have a full complement of board members. Board Member Valentine currently serves on academic achievement, and he will continue on that committee until we have new members come to the board, and we can then facilitate having the quorum that we need for the OBAFA committee. With that, I'll move to, before we start our agenda, I would like to acknowledge that this is Women's History Month 2022, with the theme this year being providing healing and promoting hope. There are so many valuable, insightful, and innovative women who have volunteered time, provided resources, donated finances, and established careers, which have contributed to the growth, development, and enrichment that makes Prince George's proud. While your names may not have made this roll call, know that you are greatly appreciated. And in this roll call are some of the trailblazers for Prince George's County. Sheila Tillerson Adams, Administrative Judge. Charlene Dukes, College President. Sue Ward, the first female secretary for the Department of Aging. Mary Lou McDonough, the first female director for the Department of Corrections. Then we have the NAACP activists, Barbara Martin, Cora Rice, June Dillard. And they have joined our ancestors, but they left a legacy. The League of Women Voters, Dorothy Genter and Thelma Board, who have also joined our ancestors and left a legacy with the League of Women Voters. Then we have our state legislators, Gloria Lala, Joanne Benson, B. Tignor, all senators, Pauline Menace, Christine Jones, Joan Pitkin, delegates. County Council, Sue Mills, Audrey Scott, Hilda Pemberton, Debbie Marshall, Dorothy Bailey. County School Board, legacies, Bonnie Johns, Joanne Bell, Sarah Johnson. I salute them and all the other women who have contributed to the growth and progress in Prince George's County. With that, I move on to let everyone know it's a joy to announce and extend congratulations to Dr. Golson and her team and the immersion programs once again. The programs have been selected as one of 5 2022 Silver Magna Award winners in the over 20,000 enrollment category. Our district and other Magna Award winners will be featured in the April issue of the American School Board Journal and will be presented with their award at the National School Boards Association's annual conference next month in San Diego. And a majority of our board members will be attending that conference. On behalf of the Board of Education, kudos to the Frederick Douglass High School boys basketball team, which has advanced to the 2022 MPSSAA Basketball State Championship. Go Eagles. In recognition, well, I've read the women's history, but that was it. So with that, I'll move on to the public comment on the agenda.
Dr.
Colleagues?
Miller?
You left off one other team along with Frederick Douglass, Eleanor Roosevelt.
I'm going to shoot the person who wrote this up.
Raiders
for me.
are
I'm not gonna try.
awesome. No violence. No violence. But Eleanor Roosevelt High School's boys basketball team is also in the finals on Saturday as well. Frederick
Thank
Douglass
you.
is at 3, Eleanor Roosevelt is at 8.
And what's their, who's their asset?
Raiders,
Raiders.
Raiders.
Go Raiders.
Thank
And
you.
on behalf of the Board of
Can-
Education.
thank you.
Kudos to you as well. And thank you, Dr. Golson, and my apologies for that oversight. I thank you. Now we can move to the public comment on agenda and non-agenda items. And we have colleagues, we have 8 registered public comment speakers this evening. Here's a note to the public. You have registered to speak in a public comment forum where the Board of Education will listen to your comments. The board will not address your comments. You must speak on the topic for which you have been registered. All registered speakers will have 3 minutes to provide comments. At the sound of the buzzer, speakers may complete that sentence only. Registered speakers may not relinquish any part of their speaking time to another registered or unregistered individual. Speakers may not address individuals or issues with profanity or derogatory terms. You will be warned once. If you continue, your comments will be terminated. Speakers are encouraged to use titles rather than names. For example, principal, CEO, school board member, etc. Please leave a copy of your statement in the file box located next to the microphone. Your adherence to these guidelines will enable the public participation process to move smoothly. When you hear your name called, you may come forward to a microphone to begin your testimony. Again, you will have 3 minutes to present your remarks. Our first registered speaker for tonight is Gerda Theodore. Please come forward. I got it right tonight, didn't I, Gerda?
Yes, ma'am. Good evening. My name is Jordan Theodore, and I am a senior at community-based classroom. Mrs. Monica Goldson said the closing of CBC provides more opportunities for students, not fewer. But does it really? If we combine all these schools to make a new one, wouldn't it defeat the purpose of the small classrooms and the safe spaces? What about the students who can't be in certain schools because of their background stories and because it's not safe for them? Now what? Since it wasn't clear the last time why we were here, let me tell you exactly what we need. We need to be heard, and we need to let this school stay exactly where it is. We have been here since 2005. We don't need to consolidate anything. Please understand my words and hear what I have to say. Why are you trying to fix something that isn't broken? Understand the fact that the decision that was made last meeting needs to be reconsidered. So I come to you this evening here as an adult, as a student, and as a resident in PDCPS. I'm asking you to please think about this and please change the verdict tonight. Thank you for your time. #SaveCBC.
Thank you, Gerda. Brittany Garcia, student, community-based classroom, Save CBC.
Good evening. Let me start off with a question. What in the world are you thinking about? CBC is a great school for students and for young adults that needs our help. I can hear all the students from public schools asking for help. Can't you? Can't you hear them asking for some better teachers and actually sit down and just listen to their problems? Can't you hear them asking for a better school? Can't you hear them asking for someone, anyone that cares about them and actually helps them out? I can. There are a lot of students that are out there asking for help. And what do you guys do? Ignore them? The Board of Education sure gave us the answer, saying that they will close CBC. Even if they decided to keep it open, why put CBC at risk for closing? That really makes me angry. That Board of Education does not care about the future students, not even the students that are in schools now. They say they want to expand it. That is a horrible idea. What I like about CBC is the small environment, the fact that teachers and classmates know each other. I have anxiety, and I love the fact that I am involved in their lives, and I am not alone. Having a small environment is a great idea. Having their alternative schools be expanded is a bad idea. An anonymous person called me yesterday morning, and I didn't answer, but if I did, I think I know what I would say. They would say to not speak today in the board meeting. But let me tell you something. I won't stay quiet. I am not scared of fighting for what I know is right. I know that person is hearing the words that I'm saying right now, so let me tell you one thing. You may scare some of my classmates, but you will never scare me. Stop being anonymous and show yourself, because I am here at the board meeting and talking. Where are you? You guys are the ones who choose the best for the students. You guys are their last hope. Will you let them be out there in the streets, or will you stand and say, keep CBC open? Make a positive change in their lives. It is actually on you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Brittany. Symphony Gibson, student, community-based classroom, Saving CBC.
Good evening to you all. My name is Symphony Gibson, and I come before you today humbly ask to please reconsider your decision with closing community-based. We have been pleading with you to not close our school for a while, and still, the Board of Education made the wrong decision. Community-based classroom may be a small learning environment, but it makes a huge impact. This school has provided us students with a tremendous amount of needed support, both academically and mentally. If you haven't actually been in our school to see how it functions, it would be extremely difficult to comprehend why we are asking you not to close our school. This school provides us with a variety of opportunities to be successful just when we had thought about giving up. I know that everyone here has noticed the ages that have been committing crimes lately. These ages are getting lower and lower by the day. Those students are out there simply taking innocent people's lives because they no longer have interest in school. They would need the second chance that we are currently receiving. Please give them that second chance by keeping CBC open. As a Prince George's County student, it really saddens my heart to see that the Board of Education simply do not care about their students. They may not say it, but they definitely let their actions speak for themselves. To those that I am standing before today, I beg that you please do the right thing and keep our school open. And to the students of community-based classroom, continue believing in yourselves and never give up. Thank you.
Thank you, Symphony. Zena Whitworth, individual, mental health of staff and students at CBC.
Good morning, everyone. I'm sorry. Good afternoon. Good evening. Oh, man. The children have said it all. And what did Mr. Valentine? Board members, you've heard the children. I don't understand what's going on. And for the life of me, I look at the numbers. I look at the data. The numbers are 1257 dropout. That's the class of 2022 that have already dropped out. They're not even counted in this year's non-grad. In 2019, they closed Northwestern. You know this. They closed Crossland, and they closed Largo. Where are those children? The crime rate is increasing. I have 2 students, seniors, that are now sitting in jail. I'm not making this up. And the other one came to drop out. This is what's going on. And we are closing something that works. And for the life of me, I don't understand why. I had a lot to say today, mostly about mental health. They have anxiety. I have anxiety too. I'm shaking. It might seem that I'm calm, but inside, I'm about to burst. That's what the doctor told me when I went and she called 911. Said I was about to combust. Because kids are dropping out for many reasons. but 1,257 have already been withdrawn this year. They started off, and now they ended up. But you voted no. Welcome back. And we got educators who are voting undecisive, people who grew up in Prince George's County, and you're saying no. Your constituents, you're saying no to restorative practices. Don't teachers deserve to be restored after serving? Don't students deserve to be restored after being forced into a situation? In this year's senior class of 2022, again, 1,257 students have dropped already. We're not counting the non-grad. We talk about the ones who've already. Crime has risen. Don't Black Lives Matter? Don't Black Lives Matter in students in schools anymore? Like, our children are dying and going to jail. And we are going to force them into edgenuity that doesn't work? Ask me, I'll tell you. It's just not right. And I hope that I'm like Pharaoh and I'm not Moses, that God will soften your hearts and you do the right thing, unless you can explain to me differently. And I've spoken to most of them, and I'm embarrassed. And these parents, they're not pleased. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Whitworth.
Bless you all.
Dominique Bivens, Individual Special Education Paperwork Day.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Dominique Bivens. I am a resource teacher at Riverdale Elementary School. The other day, we heard that teachers aren't using their paperwork day, special ed teachers. That's not true. We are using the paperwork days when we are allowed to use the paperwork days. Do understand, we have to stay in the building on those days. That means that we need to be accessible to help in other duties as assigned, doing recess, doing lunch duties, doing morning duties, evening duties. That takes away from the ability to do the paperwork. On a daily basis, our paperwork is increasing. I have been in the county for 22 years. For the last 12, I have been teaching. The amount of paperwork that I take home to complete, to meet those federal guidelines and those deadlines that we have to meet has increased tremendously. It's gone from maybe 10 hours to now 20 and sometimes 30 hours, extra hours that I am putting in to get that paperwork done. And now I'm hearing that there's a possibility that those extra paperwork days that we don't even get to use completely may be lost. I need you to think about it and to know that, yes, our teachers use the paperwork days. Yes, our teachers are coming out of that classroom when possible, even if we have to do it in a half-day increment. But we have to apply and use professional leave. That is the only way our administrators are letting us out of our classroom. It's applied as professional leave. It's not professional leave. We are still in the building. We are still working our days. And if we don't use it as professional leave, then we must use our personal leave. I would prefer to use my personal leave to have that mental health day that everyone keeps saying that we're allowed. But I have to do that paperwork so that we can stay compliant in this county. We need those 5 days. We need more than 5 days, but at least those 5 days are needed and they are being used. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bivens. Mike Kravitz, Individual Special Education.
Evening. I'm here again to highlight what I can only describe as ineptitude and intransigence in the special education. Starting early July of last year, my wife and I tried to engage with the CIEP office about finding our special needs son a suitable placement. We begged for a residential program because of his diagnosis of reactive attachment disorder, prohibiting access to education, which, as an aside, I implore you to Google because certainly the CIEP office has not done that, and I'll be here to discuss with anyone who would like. 3 months after the start of school, 3 months, he was finally placed in a non-public day program over our objections. We were told he didn't meet criteria for residential, despite criteria never being produced. On January 20th of this year, a snow day, Josh deregulated to new and dangerous levels we'd never seen before. That morning, he deregulated, assaulted me, and ran away from home because he can't handle transitions or even minor changes to his school schedule. It took the Maryland State Police to find him so I could get him to the hospital and into respite placement for his safety and mine, a placement without educational service. We happened to have an IEP meeting scheduled for the following week where we were provided a form to start home and hospital instruction while he was in respite. We had a psychiatrist fill it out and submit to PGCPS, but it was denied based on a projected time of 2 weeks in respite, which is apparently not enough time to matter. We resubmitted the form for a longer period. It was denied based on, quote, being an inappropriate option for a child awaiting placement, end quote, despite him already being enrolled in school. We then received a third denial without an associated application because someone determined he was no longer a Maryland resident. Furthermore, his school was directed by PGCPS to cease and desist preparing work packets for the same reason. To be clear, PGCPS blocked both possible routes for educating our special needs son while he was in respite. At our IEP meeting just last week, CIEP office said they intended to disenroll our son on the basis of attendance rather than address the elephant in the room, which is their own failure to work towards an appropriate placement. The remarkably unprepared PGCPS team absolutely refused to consider all options, including residential programs. This was a clear dereliction of their responsibility to provide a free and appropriate public education and an act of bad faith. I want to make it clear. We have decided to pursue a private educational placement, and we are requesting PGCPS pay for it. We officially notified the IEP team at our last meeting per state law, and we are now notifying this body because as fiduciaries, you should know what's going on in your system. It's time this child and so many more receive the free and appropriate education guaranteed to them by the state of Maryland.
Thank you, Mr. Mitchell. Alicia Hill, individual bullying of students with disabilities.
Good afternoon, Madam Chairman, school board members, and CEO. My name is Felicia Hill, and my son is a sixth grader. I have 3 children in PG County, Prince George's County school systems, one at Flowers, one at Woodmore Elementary, and one at Ernest Everest Just. And today, I'm coming to talk about my son, sixth grader at Ernest Everest Just. I'm very hurt to come here tonight to beg for human decency as it relates to how children with disabilities are treated in our school system. My son, from an early age, had an IEP and had a diagnosed disability since age 2. He suffers with anxiety, ODD, depression, and ADHD. He has attended various schools, including Wheatley, Highbridge, Robert Frost, and now Ernest Everest Just. We are now in March of this school year, and when I brought my son back into PG County Public Schools, we registered him with notifying the school system that he had an IEP, and they said that they didn't see this notation on the registration and therefore has been treating him as a student without an IEP. We've had various meetings with the school to try to get him the accommodations he needs, because without those accommodations, he's not able to receive the education or be able to function in the environment in the manner that they expect him to. I have spoken to the principal as well as the sixth grade vice principal on numerous times about the bullying, intimidation, and harassment that my son has suffered at the hands of teachers, administrators, and students. On March the 1st, I dropped my son off at school and walked over to speak to the sixth grade vice principal. A young lady screamed out my son's name and screamed to me to get my attention. She began to tease my son, which drew laughs from children that were standing near. The sixth grade vice principal stood there and never said a word to the young lady that was teasing my son. This is just an example of the bullying, intimidation, and harassment that my son has had to experience within the PG County school system. Unfortunately, as we've heard tonight already, the staff members that are being assigned to care for these students on a day-to-day basis are not equipped, don't have the compassion, and don't have the care and concern to deal with these students with special needs. It takes more than degrees, credentials, or even experience as an educator in order to be able to handle students with special needs. I beg you all to pay attention to these matters. Policy 5143 states that all allegations of BHI must be properly and thoroughly investigated. The principal and vice principal of Ernest Everest Just have refused to acknowledge and fully investigate the allegations that we have brought before them. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Sean Mitchell, individual, Maryland State Board of Education, teacher member position.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Sean Mitchell, and I am a PGCPS educator that is dedicated not only to the success of Prince George's County students, but the success of the Maryland State educational system as a whole. I am currently one of the candidates on the ballot seeking to be elected as the teacher member on the Maryland State Board of Education. I am poised and ready to assist in the betterment and advancement of the quality of our educational system by ensuring that the mission associated with Maryland schools to be safe, effective, and innovative is fully implemented. I believe that we have some of the most talented educators and students in the nation, and this is demonstrated through the use of objective, data-driven measures to improve inclusivity and, most importantly, accountability as we strive to enhance learning for every child. My passion to foster a lasting impact on the education of the children in our community and to help every child reach their full potential is only outshined by my skillful ability to communicate and collaborate with posture of servitude in order to establish educational policies, budgets, and standards that move Maryland students successfully forward on a competitive local, socio-emotional, and global marketplace. In closing, these are but a few of the descriptions that qualify and quantify why I believe I would be an excellent fit on the State Board of Education as we push forward our agenda to the parents, stakeholders, and general public, all with the endeavor of producing a world-class education system for our children of the great state of Maryland. Thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you, Mr. Mitchell. This concludes our public comment speakers. We will now move into our work session discussion topic. Dr. Golson, would you please introduce items 4.1 and 4.2 under the board work session, please?
Yes, thank you. We will first start with item 4.1, where Dr. Helen Coley and Ms. Elizabeth Faison will provide an overview of the mental health for student and staff programs, resources, and current statistics and usage. Thank you. If you could put the PowerPoint slide up, please.
Good evening.
Good evening.
We're happy to be here this evening. And I have with me this evening an individual who is quite passionate about the work of providing support to our students. This evening, Ms. Liz Faison will be here to share information specific to what we are currently doing in support of our students, staff, and family with regard to mental health support. At this time, I will defer to Ms. Faison. I'm hoping, there it is. Thank you.
Good evening, Board Chair, board members, and certainly our CEO and my chief. It is my absolute pleasure to present the progress that we have made in Prince George's County Public Schools as it relates to mental health services in our schools. I must stop and give credit to my partner, Dr. Ingrid Williams-Horton, who assisted me in gathering this information and making sure that this presentation is comprehensive for you this afternoon. So tonight I will be providing an overview of the mental health integrated model. I'll talk about the outline of services that we deliver in our schools, talk about the way that we monitor those services that are being delivered, as well as speak to additional resources and mental health supports that we provide not only to students, but to staff and to families as well. I do want to provide some context for tonight's presentation. MSDE considers our professional school counselors as well as our psychologists mental health professionals. However, tonight's presentation is relative to our clinical staff that we have hired as we rolled out our new youth care mental health program. So clinicians in our building add a layer of support that we would otherwise refer students to a community. Now, through our strategic plan, that support is within our school. Our plan is to ensure that there is a licensed mental health clinician in our schools over a 3-year period. The last year was our first year, and when we rolled out, we utilized 7 providers to staff our schools. This year, through the RFP process, we have added 3 new providers for a total of 10 who staff our schools with clinicians. We have already begun the process to launch our new RFP to add providers as our program is anticipated to grow for next year. And so during the 21-22 school year, we determined who would receive a clinician in their school based on our community schools, schools that were designated as Bridge to Excellence schools, our high schools, all of our alternative schools, as well as those schools who had a high chronic absenteeism designation, as well as schools that MSDE had determined as disproportionate discipline with suspensions. As we rolled out the program, what became most important is our messaging. And so 2 of our tools that we're utilizing to do that consist of our mental health website, where we list lots of services as well as resources for our students, our families, and our staff. Additionally, our Office of Communications created an infographic, and it shows the number of schools that have a mental health clinician this year. And of the 144 schools, 77 are community schools. So as we onboard clinicians in our schools, we ensure that they are ready to serve children. We also provide training to principals on an overview on how to maximize these new staff professionals and human capital, if you will. Parts of the process are outlined by making sure, first of all, that they have passed the background check. They too complete the same Safe Schools training videos that our employees and teachers do. We ensure that they receive a PGCPS email account that allows them to participate in Google Classrooms and communicate with our children and our families, being more readily recognized by our parents who interface with our clinicians. And also we provide an orientation to our clinicians on our administrative procedures, on their scope of work, on their reporting protocols, and other things. I'll go back. So with our clinicians in this new program, we have created an integrated service delivery model. It allows clinicians to be immersed in schools. Their critical scope of work includes individual counseling, group and family therapy. They also observe students in classes to provide some context around student behavior and student needs. They also join our school counselors, PPWs, and psychologists in providing crisis support when we have the death of a student or a staff member. They also attend meetings and provide their expertise for children who are on their caseloads or who will be on their caseloads. And lastly, they provide professional development and consultation to our principals and to our staff members. And so this chart just provides what it may look like a day in the life of a clinician and how their time may be spent or divided to provide services to the students, to the families, and certainly to our staff members. This work is monitored every week. So there is a steering committee that meets every Tuesday. I'm a part of that committee as well as the other members that are referenced on the PowerPoint presentation. And the purpose of our meeting weekly is to discuss concerns that we have heard from either our clinicians or providers, to determine planning, to monitor staffing, and to determine what our next steps are regarding programmatic needs. Additionally, our clinicians complete an electronic log every day of the services that they render in our schools. Those service delivery reports are then sent to us by their providers. And then what we do in our office is we monitor and review those reports to ensure that the services that have been delivered are aligned with the invoices that we receive from providers. This year, we're very happy to roll out something that we think will be beneficial to our clinicians, but also to our leadership in being able to monitor data and pull reports in real time. So next week, we will roll out training for BH Works. It is a new data management system. Not only will it house the services that our clinicians are providing to students, but we can also send parents an electronic consent form. And it makes receiving consent from parents much more easier than the paper and pencil process that we have in place right now. We're also able to track student progress. So we can see how are students different as a result of the counseling services that they are receiving. I love the platform because it also allows us to send students screening tools to see our students who may be depressed or who may have been exposed to trauma or suffering with anxiety. It allows our clinicians to better plan for treatment of those students according to the screening assessments. And so this is the work that has been done from September through January 15th. As you can see, 4,100 students have been served, as well as the individual counseling sessions, the group sessions that have been conducted for students, as well as family sessions, and the number of interventions for suicide prevention. Along with work that is rendered directly to students, we have work that is rendered for students or on the behalf of students. And so we see this by way of classroom observations. I referenced earlier our meetings, the consultation that clinicians provide to our principals and our teachers who may request their expertise as it relates to a student behavior, and the like. Additionally, our clinicians have provided over 1,100 workshops to students, to their families, and to our staff. as well as crisis response in our schools. And so our students manifest a litany of needs, concerns, and challenges that become the reason that drives them to the counseling session. And so anger management, anxiety, to suicidal ideation, depression, even bullying that was mentioned today, are all of the things that we have seen our students show up with regarding needing additional support. Our students are not only receiving counseling, but we know prevention and education and information is a critical part of their overall development. And so there have been 824 student workshops provided to our students in the county thus far through January the 15th. And as you can see, managing COVID fear, we know, was probably a hot topic as our students transition back to the schoolhouse in September. Additionally, they provide information on how to access the mental health program, what it is intended to do. They learn strategies around mindfulness and problem solving, decision making, and certainly how to regulate their emotions in a better way. So we found a way to bring our parents along who may in fact have students with mental health challenges or mental health diagnoses. And oftentimes our parents need information as well as the information that we're providing to staff and to students. And here in this slide just itemizes a number of workshops that our clinicians provided directly to parents this year so far. So clinicians have provided much needed training to our staff as well. From the overview of mental health program to providing the strategies on how to support students in the classroom by helping teachers understand how to de-escalate problematic behavior, how to create calming spaces for their students. They've talked about childhood trauma and the adverse childhood experiences. Compassion fatigue is another hot topic. We know that our teachers bear the burdens of the students that come into their classroom. And oftentimes, if our teachers have a great relationship with students, our students divulge information to our teachers, and our teachers are trying to support them academically, but also they support them in other ways as well. So compassion fatigue, it can be very real for our educators. Stress management and trauma-sensitive environments are also additional sessions that have been provided to teachers. So what have we seen in general? Our clinicians have said they have seen progress in our students based on the services that they have rendered. Some of our students' use of drugs have declined and their ability to cope has increased. Some of the symptoms that students have had as they have suffered with anxiety, and they've learned techniques on how to handle that. Our students have decreased the suicidal thoughts they've had in the past, as well as we've seen a decrease in the disruptive behaviors for those students who are in counseling. Additionally, we've seen some increases. Our students have increased in self-esteem, in their excitement about coming to school, even their engagement in coming to the counseling process, as well as referring their peers to our clinicians as well. And our parents have also increased their engagement. And so while we continue to work on the work, we know that where good things exist, challenges also exist. And so we yet have work to do on some of the challenges that we have seen that pose as a barrier to our students being able to access the mental health resources that are available in schools. So this just lists some of the things that we've seen from inconsistent student attendance. So perhaps a student can come one day this week, but they can't come next week for whatever reason. And so those missed sessions can impact a student's progress in the counseling process. Also gaining parental consent. And I will partner that with reducing the stigma and parents not open to treatment and services. So we know that mental health is not readily accepted by everyone. And sometimes our values and beliefs about mental health can keep families from receiving the mental health services and embracing those services that are available. And so we are working on a way to communicate, to message, and to bring parents along to be more accepting of this and to reduce that barrier of access. I mentioned earlier about the training and education that is necessary for our students to be well-rounded. We don't always want to provide services on the back end and intervention, but we do want to create opportunities for our students to learn in a preventive way so that they will grow and develop the strategies and skills that they need to be productive citizens in our schools and certainly in our society. And so here you see listed a number of our social emotional programs that we have in our schools, also mental health courses that are available this year in our schools, as well as safe schools videos that we have provided to students as well, very similar to those that are provided to our teachers. Our students can learn suicide awareness as well as bullying and cyberbullying, from depression to how to form good, healthy relationships, and certainly how to resolve their conflicts and disagreements. Additionally, I referenced earlier other counseling supports by human capital that's in our schools. So not only are our clinicians providing counseling to our students, our professional school counselors, our psychologists, as well as school social workers for schools that have them as well. Additionally, there are a number of websites and resources, text lines, and call centers that we have provided to students who are in crisis, and they are referenced here in this document. So we've provided information regarding supporting our students and parents, but we cannot forget our staff. So therefore, sharing mental health supports for staff is essential to the fabric also of our school community. And so our benefits office has partnered with Innova. We have an employee assistance program, and what it does is it provides 4 free counseling services to our employees. And our employees are able to call and choose a clinician or a location that is close to them or virtual counseling, and they receive 4 free sessions of counseling. Care First offers lifestyle coaching that includes personalized counseling, educational materials, support, encouragement, and online tools for our staff. Kaiser Permanente very similarly provides one-on-one coaching to help teachers and employees set goals, to assist them with sticking to those goals to gaining the results that they want to see. And so there is a direct correlation in many studies between exercise and reduced stress. And so our benefits office recently rolled out the Wellness 360 program. And so this allows our teachers to go online and challenge one another, also learn virtual mindful movement classes, cooking. They have monthly webinars that provide information to our teachers on stress management and the like, as well as other wellness resources. Last but not least, our Wellness 360 Burn Along is the last program, or most recent program, that was developed by our benefits office. It allows our teachers to go online and participate in a number of fitness programs and videos. Last but not least, Over the year, we provided, including last year, we provided a number of workshops to our administrators as well as to our teachers. And so here is linked a number of trainings that we provided, from you can't pour from an empty cup to getting to the finish line, social emotional learning, and also leading with self-care. So thank you for your time, and I'm open to questions.
Thank you, Dr. Faison. Is it done? Are there any questions from board members? I don't know who came first, so I'm going to go. Board Member Mickens Murray.
Good evening, and thank you so much for this presentation. You know, we get a lot of comments about what are you doing for your teachers, how are you helping them to cope. So my question is, we have the classes and the workshops that you have. Do teachers have to do this on their own time, or is there some time available during the day if the school can manage that? Or have you even thought about it?
So let me respond. So they can,
Okay.
if they want to use some of their planning time, they can, but if you recall, the Board of Education also approved mental health days, one per month for the remainder of this school year. So they can also use those half-a-days for that as well.
Okay, that's good, thank you. Then my other question is, I saw where you keep track of how many students and parents take advantage of these workshops. Do you feel comfortable that the parents and the students are receptive and seeking these programs out? Or do you feel like you have to identify a cohort to take these workshops?
I would say it's a work in progress. So this is the second year that we've actually rolled out this program. Before, if a student had a need for mental health challenge, if they had mental health challenges or a need for services, we would refer those students out to the community to provide those services. So this is the second year in our district that we have provided in-house clinicians to be supportive of our families and of our students. So there are a cadre of parents and students who've been exposed to this, and they are amenable and acceptable. And then there is a group that we're trying to coerce and bring along and provide benefits as to why mental health is important. The same way you would go to the physical doctor if you had high hypertension or if you had diabetes, that is the very same way that we should seek support for our mental health. So we have work to do regarding that area.
Okay, I appreciate that. And finally, I know a lot of students across country, so it's not unique to Prince George's County, have younger students in the elementary schools committing suicide. Do you have any data for our system that you want to share? And what are some of the preventive things our system is providing to, let's say, the elementary students?
So I will say we have a suicide database that we keep every time our students present with suicidal ideation. Our school counselors, as well as our psychologists, and now our mental health clinicians, complete a risk assessment to see where those students are as it relates to their ability to commit suicide, to see where they are with that. We also do have a database to show the number of students who have committed suicide in our school system. There are a number of things preventive-wise that we are rolling out in our school system. Number one, we provide, as was referenced in the PowerPoint, our Safe School videos provides information around suicide awareness, as well as our mental health videos through Everify to provide that information to students in a way that they know what mental health symptoms are, to learn coping strategies, and to be able to seek help when they need help. And so there are additional things that we are beginning to roll out through Cognito, which is a suicide awareness program. We also have mental health first aid that we rolled out several years ago, training our teachers on what mental health signs may look like and how to distinguish when a student may be in crisis. We also utilize our professional school counselors and our psychologists to provide classroom guidance lessons to our students so that our students know who to go to when they have a need for support.
I appreciate that. Thanks so much.
Board Member Williams.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Faison, for this report. I just love these work sessions because this is our opportunity to learn how you all do all the things that you do. And it also helps us to have a better understanding when community and constituents come and ask for a certain service. We know where to send them. So I appreciate this report. The support within the schools and the clinician providers. I'm always concerned about my district because in the categories that were listed, the one that I know that we fit the bill are high schools. So I'm glad that we have them in high schools. What are we doing with the schools that do not fit any of those priority areas?
So those schools that do not have a clinician this year so far will have a clinician next year, and the following year, all schools will have a clinician. Okay. So right now, what we're doing is utilizing our school counselors and our psychologists to provide those services to our students. And where necessary, if a psychologist or a counselor sees a student that requires additional services beyond their expertise, then they would refer those students to a community agency, much like our clinicians would do in our schools.
Thank you so much for that. That's good information to know. And so that, I had another question about the number and how you handled the data capture. And I see my good buddies are here that is in the data department. How do you capture, or how did you capture the baseline? Because in the presentation, you stated that there is a decrease in certain areas that we want to see. There are increases in certain areas that we want to see. I'd just like to know, how did you come up with that baseline, being that last year we were in COVID, and you know, we're coming back into the school building now full time. How did you capture that baseline data to be able to stand firm on we see a decrease or an increase?
So those reports are anecdotal from our clinicians. Mm-hmm. So from the time that they began seeing students in September through this reporting period in January, they were able to report what they have seen with the students that they have been serving. So that those reports are based on anecdotal stories of clinicians.
So we're sort of getting our baseline
Absolutely.
Now. That's great to know too. And are we following that data as individuals, and are we incorporating it into core cohort? How are we able to capture that data, since I know we do a data capture for academic success? Are we capturing that data, the mental health data, for individuals as well?
So the good thing about BH Works that we're rolling out training for next week will allow us to do just that.
Okay, great. I would just love to follow this along, especially when you talk about the fact that it is amazing that you're providing our young students with knowledge on things that they can learn and, you know, figure out for themselves that I'm having some issue. And I learned in my mental health class that now I can use these strategies, or I need to go and talk to someone, and to be able to plant those seeds early. I am confident that as those students move through the system, they will have the strategies to have options other than hurting themselves or others. So I would just love to see that data be captured and see in 3 or 5 years that our students at PGCPS have the ability to sort of do self-care so that they don't go to the extreme. So I was very happy to see that we are actually providing mental health education to our students in class, along with math and science, and now we're teaching them how to sort of, take some knowledge of how they're feeling. And I think that is just so awesome. The other part about this is that it takes all 3 legs on this stool to work: our students, our teachers, and our parents. And the fact that we're offering programs and classes and information to all 3 groups, it will help us stand firm when we're doing these things. How are we marketing these services, and how are we making sure that the community is aware that these services are available? How are we doing that?
So right now, we have an infographic that's available that we do send out. The clinicians in their schools have sessions with parents to say, like, back to school night, to announce their program and to provide a session on what the program actually is. We do hope, though, to really increase our communication efforts to our families and also to our students. We do not want this to be a best-kept secret or a resource that is not fully utilized in our schools. So we have some work.
And I just wanted to add, during one of the telephone town halls, one of the parents asked about mental health support. So we do include them in our Engage newsletter as well.
Thank you. Board Member Boozer Strother.
Thank you, Dr. Miller. Dr. Faison, I just want to thank you for your outstanding work of growing this program over the last few years. It started since 2018, very few clinicians to the number today, thanks to the Blueprint for Maryland's Future and decisions of budgeting. And thank you, Dr. Goldson, as well for these decisions. But I've been so privileged to get to work with you over these years, and all the way through. I remember the outstanding trauma-informed teacher program that you hosted with Catholic Charities at Northwestern High School. You helped us with mental health forums at the beginning of COVID, and even today assisting the city of Hyattsville through trauma that is happening for an entire region of PGCPS families. So I just want to acknowledge that and thank you, and Dr. Williams-Horton, for that management. One of the questions I have, and I think I'm hearing that this is probably not an issue, but almost every day nationally there are stories about students, families accessing mental health services, that they can't get appointments, that there are staffing shortages. I don't think I'm hearing that that's happening here, but if you could just comment on if that could be a concern.
Staffing is always the concern. And so this year, we know that across the board, from our school nurses to our teachers to our bus drivers and our clinicians are no different from the number of staff that we've been able to hire. When we are at capacity, we will have 140 clinicians. Right now, we have 10.5 vacancies. 2 of those are recent resignations wherein those schools were staffed. And so around our state, everyone is looking to do the very same thing, and that is hire clinicians in their schools. And so recruiting is a challenge. Our providers talk about the fact that recruiting is a challenge because they're fishing out of the same pool, so to speak. And so we do, that's the reason for launching another RFP to bring on other providers who may have access to additional clinicians so that we can close the gap on our vacancy.
Great, thank you for letting us know that there are like proactive measures on that end, because it does seem like it could happen here, given the national landscape and some of these staffing shortages that all school systems are looking at. The other thing I wanted to ask about is, there's a note of managing COVID fears quite a bit in the report. And, so the one thing I think we're struggling with is the fear versus a very low vaccine rate, because children and adults have know that the vaccine is the pathway back to normalcy, out of this pandemic, and we are going for an 80% rate. Our county is nowhere near that. Is there an intersection for this conversation around vaccine hesitancy with mental health services and as a healthcare conversation that we need to be having in PGCPS if we are going to reach this 80% point? Because in some of my communities, we are still at 50, 60%, and certainly with our 5 young children, way lower. And that is certainly an impact on the system. So children and managing COVID fears, and that they're living this experience that they are not being vaccinated. Is that coming out? Is that something we need to be on top of?
I think that's something that we can go back to the clinicians and see if we can craft something, maybe a presentation. So far, when they do the facing COVID fears, it was really around them coming back into the building, diffusing any information that was misinformation around COVID, and also just reiterating safety protocols for them. Some of it was rooted in grief and loss from some of the family members, and even from some of their peers that they had lost due to COVID. So that workshop was pretty substantive and had a number of issues that it addressed. But I think that we could go back and have a greater conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Faison. Board Member Thomas.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation, and thank you to my colleague, Ms. Boozer-Strother, asking some questions that were along the same lines as mine. Ms. Faison, I know you'd mentioned that at capacity we'd be at 140, but I know on one of the slides in alignment with our strategic goals, we want 1 in every building. So that's 140 today, but within 3 years, upwards of short of just upwards of 200, correct? My question was, I think I have an idea of the answer, but I'm just curious, what you would both say would hold us back from actually reaching that point? Would it be in terms of the talent pool? Would it be a budget issue? I guess it could be both, or any other potential hiccups in the process of getting there within 3 years?
Yeah, let me just say thank you to all board members for continuing to approve the CEO's budget, where this is year 2 where it's funded, and you've already approved for it to be in next year's budget. Hopefully the county council will also agree with your recommendation. So it won't be the funding piece, it really will be the staffing component piece.
Yeah, that's what I figured. Okay, I'm just curious, just looking ahead and seeing, I think this is an ambitious and needed goal. But obviously we have lots of ambitious goals that we run into pitfalls. So I'm just thinking about that in advance. I'm also curious, one of the slides that I thought was helpful was one that kind of broke down the distribution of time that we're expecting our mental health professionals to be spending. And obviously, you both are folks who have been in the education system, and you know that these allocations of times don't always line up with exactly how things play out in a day-to-day. I would love to see, this is less of a question and more of a request, I would love to maybe get, just some survey data from stakeholders that are actual mental health professionals that are in our system around how accurate these time distributions are to what they're getting to do. I think anecdotally, we hear lots of examples of folks that feel that they're a little more inundated with the paperwork side of things, and we know obviously these are inevitable, but it would just be helpful to know how accurately those allocated time blocks are matching up with folks' reality. I think knowing from the stakeholders' perspective, And I think also it could be helpful to gather, I'm sure we gather some data from students and staff, but I think it could just be helpful to look at that as well, just to measure kind of the efficacy of what we're doing. So that's all.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas, for that comment. Because when Ms. Faison and I have those weekly conversations, we're looking for the evidence, what's written and the time that's indicated on the forms. We go to actual schools and have those conversations with key players to find out specifically if what is written is what is occurring. So the word evidence is a word that is heard quite often from me. And the team, we respond accordingly. So thank you for that.
I appreciate that. So it sounds like there's some good anecdotal evidence. Would you mind sharing, like, what you're kind of hearing on the ground? Do you feel like these expectations are aligned with what folks are getting to put out in reality, or does it depend on campus by campus? How do you see that playing out right now?
Well, certainly it probably would depend upon campus by campus, but the push for this to occur in every school is evident. We're pushing it. We're communicating it. Over-communicating it in most instances, but could we better communicate it? Yes, there's always a need for improvement. However, what we look at specifically is the relationships that have been developed amongst the key players within a school, to include the professional school counselor along with the mental health clinician. They work in concert. I'm really proud of the fact as well that now when a student is suspended, one of our entrances, when they are going back into the school, returning from suspension, it is a requirement that there is a conversation that occurs with that student between the mental health support and or the professional school counselor. So those are some specific strategies that are current. The expectation for that provision is in every school.
Thanks very much.
And can I add one thing to that, too? The distribution of time is intended to be an example. It also helps our principals to know what a clinician may do during their day. The other part of that, as Dr. Coley stated, and I really echo, if a clinician is in a high school, a large high school, they may spend a majority of their time counseling students because of the demand and because of the student population, the enrollment. So it will vary from building to building.
Thank you both very much.
Board Member Valentine.
Thank you, and I echo my colleagues' appreciation for the work that you all do and for the information. I think for me, and I imagine for others, trying to really assess the capacity or the amount of students who need support based on those who are asking for it. Based on everything you said regarding parent support, stigma, and the like, that many could see this as a tip of the iceberg, that there are a number of students who really are just in need of it but are not getting it. And so the couple questions I have is, one, what can we do as board members, as a community, to really try to address the stigma related to this, whether we're working with community partners, some of our faith leaders, and particularly as it relates to students who confide more in friends about these issues than in others. And is there a mechanism for friends to anonymously sort of say, I had a conversation with a student, and maybe there's a wellness check because that conversation took place. I also had a question particularly around how we're addressing students with the language barriers that you mentioned as well. Having those who are multilingual who could also provide those services. A couple other things really quickly. Understanding we had resources from the federal government to do this, and more budgetarily long term, that's a one-time allotment of money. Are we able to sustain these things over time? And then my last question is particularly around those who need support outside of the school day, and do we have a 24-hour hotline to call for students who are having issues late in the night and really need someone to talk to? And so, as it relates to addressing the issues and stigmas that you highlighted before, that we can really get an accurate count of the need, the funding, long-term sustainability of the funding, But lastly, how are we ensuring that we give maximum access, whether it be to 24-hour services around reporting and asking for help when it's not during the school day?
One of the things that I would say is that we know that every child that needs it is not getting it. We do know that every child that may need the services may not feel comfortable, or their family may not be in support of it. So we do know. We do have to create a way to determine how many students need it, and to ensure that those who need it are actually those who are accessing those services. Right now, when we look at the language barrier, we use language links. Our clinicians were trained by the Office of Interpreting Services, and so they use language links to provide counseling services to students. We'd love to have more bilingual therapists. We do have a few, but not nearly as many as we need. Additionally, our county, not our school system, but our county has a 24-hour hotline, and we do provide that resource to our students, to our staff, and to our principals to message to our students. So that's what I would say in response.
And Mr. Valentine, in reference to your question, there are commonly opportunities where one student will inform the professional school counselor or another individual within the school of a need for their peers. So that is something that we take pride in, and immediately upon receiving that, actions do.
To follow up on the 24-hour piece, did the American Recovery Act funds provide for resources for us to even in the school system access private services for counseling 24 hours a day?
So the categories were broad enough. There were 14 categories. They were broad enough that as long as you could justify a connection to how it related to COVID, then typically you could. But for us, because we have 130,000 students, our goal was to try to create a mechanism that would allow every student access instead of the one who knew about the information and then utilized it.
Board Member Saron Ruiz.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you for the amazing presentation and the amazing work that you're doing. When it comes to mental health, an issue we always talk about, students always talk about, as board members, we always bring up. And so I'm truly excited to see a lot of the data being put together when it comes to mental health. My first question was regarding the addressing barriers page. And so you mentioned the gaining parental consent part, the student schedules part. So I wanted, clarification on what is the current process for students to get help. Are they getting parent consent first? Is this being done during class periods? What is the current process right now?
So currently, for our clinicians to see a student, especially if they're going to be providing counseling services to them more than just an immediate crisis, if they're going to be doing it 6 to 8 weeks or 12 weeks, they would seek the permission, signed consent from their parent. One example of what we're doing to try to reduce getting consent is, for example, we met with our Prince George's mobile crisis team today, the Sante Group. The Sante Group comes into our school system and provides crisis support to students in the moment. They also provide wellness checks to homes. And what we have done today is created a universal universal consent form. We will be launching that so that all parents know, as well as an MOU. We will be creating an MOU with them so that parents will know this is a partner that we will be utilizing, and parents can opt out. Other than that, when the Sante Group comes in, they will not need to get consent to provide crisis response for every single student who need support the day of the crisis response.
Thank you, because, I mean, definitely recognize that for a lot of communities, I mean, getting mental health support, especially with young males, it's that stigma that, you know, you don't need mental health support, you know, man up. And so I think definitely getting that support and mitigating in terms of consent is definitely helpful. And my second question is, there are mentions of our mental health clinicians that are being rolled into all of our schools, and then our present school psychologists. So what is the role of our school psychologists presently? Are they working hand in hand? Because I know having multiple mental health supports are helpful, but we've heard about the mental health clinician. So what is the role of the school psychologist right now?
Okay, so what we describe it as is a triage, if you will, triage approach. So our professional school counselors are governed by the American School Counseling Association. They are to conduct services that help students around career, around college readiness, around personal and social development, as well as academic support, graduation, right? And so they also provide counseling to students wherein there's a barrier to them being able to access their educational program. There may be a student that a counselor sees, and the student's needs are more chronic than the expertise of the counselor. And so that counselor will then refer that student to the clinician in the building. Our psychologists are also trained to provide counseling. What they do more often than counseling is ensure that our students are assessed. So every time a student is referred through an IEP team and the parent gives consent for a student to be evaluated, then our psychologists are the persons who are doing those evaluations in our schools. They also support crisis response, suicidal ideation, behavior threat assessments, and those types of things. But there are times when they work together as a group, and there are times when their roles are diversified.
Thank you.
Board Member Adam Stafford.
Thank you. Thank you so much for this great report. I just had a couple of questions. On page 27, you mentioned restorative approaches. Could you talk a little bit about some of the restorative approaches, particularly circles and the role that training takes in terms of implementing those with fidelity? And then also I wanted to know, I know we've talked a little bit about federal support for mental health, and I know that President Biden has passed this youth mental health plan. And I just wanted to know if, you know, this summer when that comes out, what are some of our plans to sort of bolster some of those federal efforts that are happening? For instance, the 988 number, which is going to be a number for youth to call instead of calling 911, and some of these community behavioral health clinics. I don't know if we might be receiving some funding to expand those. I also, yeah, those are just two of my questions there.
So first, to address restorative approaches. Restorative approaches, a couple of years ago, the definition of restorative approaches changed. And so it's no longer just restorative practices, but it now includes an umbrella of restorative approaches, from circles to peer mediation, which we have in our schools. We right now have 146 schools that are trained in peer mediation. Our goal this year is that we would have 175 schools. It also includes positive behavior interventions and support as a restorative approach. Specifically as it relates to circles, there are a number of training sessions that an employee must go through in order to be able to fully implement restorative approaches. And so if you can imagine, our circle training is one of those training sessions, because we're not doing face-to-face training, is a part of our training that has been delayed for our new schools that have come on most recently. And so when it comes to accessing the federal dollars, our office currently manages several grants that support mental health supports in our schools. We know that through our grants office, they will be sending us that information, and we will be looking to secure and continuing to roll out and build capacity for other programs that are necessary in our county.
Thank you. Board Member, any other questions? Board Member Adam Stafford? Board Member Williams?
Thank you. Thank you for the response. In round one, my focus on this round is really about our teachers. COVID, all of us had to deal with things. I could go back to work and go into the office and be off. You know, I don't have to be on. When our teachers hit that classroom in front of those 30 students, they have to be on every single day. So when I saw the supports for the teachers that you showed, and you had some amazing ones, those mental health, even cooking, because some of us did gain a little weight while we were in COVID. The ability for us to focus on not just the mental, but the physical and moving will help us deal with that emotional piece when it comes up. All of this stuff is connected. So my question to you is, how many of our teachers are taking advantage of this opportunity, and how are we sort of moving those teachers who are not taking advantage of these opportunities to sort of nudge them a little? We may not feel as though we need it, but I think any support that we can get in transitioning out of COVID and back to the new normal will help us to, provide the frontline service that our teachers are providing. I mean, they have been amazing in how they've come back into the school system, dealing with all of the new requirements to try to keep our students and other staff members safe. How are we ensuring that every teacher takes advantage of at least one of these many opportunities?
So to speak to the number of teachers, our benefits office houses that information as they roll out these programs with the number of teachers who are viewing the videos, as well as those who may be logging in to view the videos. And so we can provide that information through that office regarding the number of teachers that are taking part in that work. As far as how are we encouraging teachers to take advantage, or more teachers to take advantage, I know the benefits office sends email blasts. I see it in the Engage newsletter. It's on our website. There have been a number of sessions that they have provided to schools directly, like chair yoga and different things like that. Also, benefits office, they have connected with us a year ago, where we provided Mr. Scott Showalter. I have to talk about him because he really is the person who really lifted this program from the first year, from the ground. And so we trained together with the benefits office a year ago when teachers came back to in-person learning. Self-care and you can't pour from an empty cup was about that. And benefits office also provided the information to teachers directly. And we can go back and see that some of those videos are widely referenced and utilized even now. And that was a year ago.
And just one, I saw that we have the EAP programs and something that's being provided from each of our healthcare providers. How is it different now compared to what was provided before? Because an EAP option has been available, for a long time. What are some of the new parts that we've added since we returned back?
I'm not sure that there have been new parts. I think that the situations and circumstances that have arisen as a result of COVID-19, they have made counseling services more important than they perhaps have been in the past. And so, yes, we've had EAP for many, many years, probably as long as I've been an employee in the school system. And yet people don't need resources until they really feel like they need the resources. And I think because of what we're seeing now, more and more people are needing stress management, needing to talk about grief and loss, needing to talk about the outgrowth of what COVID-19 has done to our families and the isolation and things that we've seen as a result of some being losing their jobs and economics being a concern, counseling now, more so than ever, has been a need unearthed by COVID-19.
Thank you so very much.
Thank you so much. I have more of a comment than a question. Dr. Golson, I continue to be impressed with your leadership team. Your leadership team speaks with knowledge. It's not surface. It's not superficial. Ms. Faison or Dr. Faison, you know what you're talking about, and I can feel it, and I can see it, and I know that you're engaged, so I want to continue to be a part of this. So all I can say is, I know I have taken your safe schools. I've done them all that I was supposed to do, so it's done. I was impressed with that. The coping skills, that is something when I was on the Commission for Women that we looked at across this county. And even the county exec, her team, did something around coping skills. So all I'm saying is it appears that we in Prince George's County are finally getting on one page around children. And that's an important thing. So I compliment you guys, and I am so impressed. And I definitely want to be a part of where you're taking us, because I can see it. There's a vision here. So I appreciate all that you've done. And this presentation, I'm excited. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
I concur. Are there any more questions in reference to the mental health programs? Excellent job, Dr. Faison. And thank you.
All right, thank you.
Dr. Golson, for.
We are now on item 4.2. So at this time, Dr. Coley and Ms. Faison are going to step away, and now joining the team are Dr. Doug Strader and Mr. Anthony Whittington, who will provide an overview of item 4.2, which is on our class of 2021 graduation cohort data. If you can put the PowerPoint up for graduation cohort, we would appreciate it. Thank you. We're ready to begin.
So good evening. Chair Miller, Vice Chair Williams, distinguished members of the board, thank you very much for this time this evening to share the 2021 graduation cohort rate. Doug Strader, Chief of Accountability. I'm joined again with my colleague, Anthony Whittington, who is within the Department of Monitoring Accountability within the division. Before we get started, I wish to take a few minutes to define what it is that we're about to look at. In other words, to define what the cohort graduation rate actually is. Many think that the graduation rate is basically from the 12th grade class of 2021, it's simply those students that graduated, those 12th graders that graduated versus the 12th grade class as a whole. That's not the case. What we're going to be looking at here is the actual 4-year adjusted cohort graduation rate. Now within that, I emphasize the word cohort because that's the key to the numbers that we're about to share. The cohort is actually the cohort of 9th graders that began their high school careers during the 2017-2018 school year. That's the initial population of students that we're going to be talking about. It's called the adjusted cohort rate because as that cohort matriculates from grade 9 to 10, 10 to 11, 11 to 12, adjustments occur each year to account for the students that are transferring into that cohort, as well as the students that transfer out, and unfortunately those that may pass. So what you end up with is a cohort of students of which we have to account for every single student. Okay, so at the end of the 4 years, we're going to be looking at the 4-year adjusted cohort data here. You're going to have the total number of students that graduated at the end of those 4 years versus that population I just described. those students that began their career during the 17-18 school year, plus those that transferred in, minus those transferred out. So I just wanted to set that stage so you understand the detail of the data that we're about to share. So let's begin. First, a few highlights. The good news. Number one, our graduation rates increased by 1.4% this year. We also have 10 schools that met that 90% threshold. They scored 90% or higher as far as the graduation rates are concerned. Two, our Hispanic graduation rate increased by nearly 4 percentage points. Both our male and female graduation classes, both genders, actually increased as well. We're going to take a closer look at that. That was one of the questions from the board, so we did include a few slides to focus on gender. 4, the dropout rate, which is the actual inverse of the graduation rate, spend some time talking about this, is actually the lowest it's been in 5 years. It dropped 2.4%. And last, what I'll share here, just for a few highlights, our free and reduced meals population, an indicator of poverty status, actually increased by nearly 2 percentage points. These are all positives, especially when considering that we're still dealing with the pandemic. And this is actually contrary to what we're seeing nationally, many other states. A bit more. So what we're going to get into now is a series of charts. Just to give you a heads up, every time you see a chart like this with red bars, the red represents the state data. So anywhere you see red in comparison to blue, we're comparing state versus local data. So looking at this, as I mentioned before, nationally there's a trend of falling graduation rates in many states. This is simply not the case here in Maryland, although modest. Maryland did increase by about a little bit, less than 1%, but it was still an increase, where here in Prince George's County Public Schools, we experienced a 1.4%. We're now going to take a deeper dive into looking at the demographic slices of the data that you see here. Continuing with the 5-year trend illustration, there was, again, the question regarding gender. Both genders improved from the prior years. The females continue to graduate at a higher rate. This has been a lasting trend for a long time. But either way, the data is shared here, and you can see what the achievement is. We're now going to break the data down by race ethnicity students. This chart illustrates the 2-year trend for each student group. 4 of the 5 race ethnicity student groups have experienced gain. The only one that didn't was the Black African American group, which just experienced a slight decline. Taking a closer look at how our 2 largest racial student groups compared to the states. This first illustrates the performance again of that Black African American student group. First impressions, I was amazed to see how close our performance mimics that of the state. Point where we had to double check it a few times. Not only that, I can assure you those first 3 blue bars you see there are accurate. We were stagnant at 84.3% for those 3 years. That is not an anomaly. So again, it's very interesting to see how close we are in lockstep with the state, especially when you consider we have 1/6 of the state population of this student group that attend here at Prince George's County Public Schools. So you can see again, our slight decline actually mimicked the slight decline of the state. We also had a slight. Taking a closer look at our second largest population, this is our Hispanic population. Unfortunately, the gap here is significantly large, roughly 10%. when you take a look at our Hispanic population compared to many of the districts, Hispanic population is very different. We can get into that information, but within our Hispanic population, significantly higher population of newcomers, ELs, as well as free and reduced meal students. That requires you to take a two-tier slice approach. Focusing now on service group. The three service groups included here are special education service group, our English language learning service group, as well as our free and reduced meals service group. Two of the three service groups identified here did experience increases, being the English language learners, free and reduced meals. Special education service group, however, did I mentioned the red bars before, so here we're comparing our service group performance to the state. The gaps are roughly between 4.5%, 2.7%. Our EL, English Language Learning student group, smallest gap. The presentation thus far is focused on graduation data. We shared a graduation rate of 77.6% for the district as a whole. So the question may be asked, what's the other 22%? One of the things that we look at, we report on, we study, we analyze, what we refer to as our dropout rate. So of our non-grads basically are comprised of two separate populations. Those that are considered dropout, in other words, they're no longer receiving educational services, and those that are continuing in their learning, however, they did not graduate within the 4 years. So of those two, our dropouts actually comprise 15.4% of that graduation that I shared, the 22% shared earlier. The students continuing with their learning is roughly 7%. It'll be interesting to see how our 5-year graduation rate is going to be impacted next year. Because what I can share with you right now, and I shared with you earlier, what you see illustrated here, our dropout rate is actually the lowest it's been in the past 5 years. So hopefully we'll see a reflection of this within our 5-year rate next year when we're sitting at this table reporting on where we are. So what makes up our dropout? Our dropouts are comprised in this district of 3 primary reasons. We code these in our systems. They have descriptors. The 3 primary descriptors are, first and foremost, number 1, we refer to it as whereabouts unknown. I mentioned when we were talking about our cohorts, we must account for every single student that starts their career in 9th grade, finishes out at the end of grade 12. Each year we have students that just disappear. We're expecting them to arrive in September, and they don't. We have students in the middle of the year that just start tracking unexcused absences, can't find them. So we have this population of students that we need to go out, track, verify, try to get them back, and or try to figure out where they went. Many of these students have transferred. They've transferred to other school districts. They've transferred to other states. They've transferred to non-public schools. They've transferred to homeschool. We have to do diligence in trying to account for those. We can account for those students that are continuing to receive educational services elsewhere. We can remove those students from the cohort, which increases our graduation rate. And that's our chart. We need to ensure all students are continuing in their learning. For those students that are not, we need to figure out why. Try to get them back in our schools, or at least code them appropriately. So again, I mentioned the 3 highest. Number 1 is whereabouts unknown. The second dropout code, most prevalent dropout code, is due to a lack of interest. The third is for employment, where students are dropping out due to employment. Those are by far the three leading withdrawal codes of our. Continuing on, this is breaking the dropout rate by gender, breaking it out by gender. You can see the difference between the dropout rates between our male and female population. Rather significant. So at this point, I would now like to introduce again Mr. Anthony Whittington. He's going to share a few more successes as well as share a technical solution we've developed here in our county to support our schools and other stakeholders in supporting our students and achieving their diploma. Whittington?
Good evening, board members. Dr. Golson, thank you for this opportunity. First, I would be remiss if I did not celebrate all of our high school leaderships and staff for the outstanding work they've done amidst this pandemic, still producing large numbers of graduates. The slide in front of you represents 7 of the highest increases that we have for our school district, for schools that represented 3% or greater gain. 2 I'd like to highlight would be Northwestern High School and High Point High School, because these are schools that fall in comprehensive support and improvement, meaning that they were recognized or identified by the state as schools of needing improvement. As you see, both of them have registered 4% or higher increases within their graduation rate. In addition, out of the 30 high schools that we have that exit student, 14 showed some type of an increase. 10 schools had a graduation rate of 90% or higher, and we even have a school with a 100% graduation rate, again, the Academy of Health Sciences. All of these schools are to be celebrated. Which brings us to our new platform, which is called the Cohort Tracker Dashboard. The Cohort Tracker Dashboard assists schools with assigning students to a particular cohort, which Dr. Strader mentioned earlier. The Cohort Tracker enhances schools' ability to better identify the students and their transactional entries that impact the graduation rate of each school. Now schools have the ability to look over each of the cohort and drill down to specific students and determine if they're on track or off track for graduation, which you can see in the tabs above on the left-hand side. It'll say class of 2022, class of 2023, etc. I'll talk more about that with the screenshots as we move further. In addition, it allows for their exit and entry code. Moreover, we no longer have to wait for Maryland State Department of Education to provide our graduation rate, which normally comes out 5 months after students have graduated. This platform has been built to now take all of the business rules that the state of Maryland is utilizing to calculate graduation rate and cohort. Next slide. This screenshot was taken in September of 2021, or the beginning of the school year, where the cohort tracker predicted that our graduation rate for our district would be roughly 77.54. Last month, or in the month of February 2022, our graduation rate returned. And as Dr. Strader stated, our graduation rate was 77.6, which shows the accuracy of this tool. While we're excited about the students that are in blue, our focus is now on the students that are in red, the non-graduate. Of that roughly 2,100 students, we still have 700 that are currently enrolled as fifth-year students. And we're doing all that we can to program effectively for those as well, so they will exit within the 5-year adjusted cohort. All right, so now let's take a look at the class of 2022. These are students that are currently in our building this year or in their 4th year of school, hence the term 4-year adjusted cohort graduation rate. The yellow piece of the pie represents roughly 80% of students, and they're classified as seniors, which is a good thing, or a good indication of what our graduation rate may be as we get closer to the finish line. Where we see students that are off track are in the pie chart of the orange. The orange represents 4% of our students classified as juniors but are in their 4th year of school. 2.3% are 10th graders classified as sophomores in their 4th year of school. And the 9th grade, 72 students, is less than 1%. Now, we do have a large number of students classified as dropouts. However, this represents 12.8%. And Dr. Strader just recently mentioned our dropout rate being one of the lowest it has been in 5 years at 15%. It looks like our dropout rate will be even lower for this graduating class that is coming through right now, which is potentially good news. The beauty of this dashboard is that we can now drill down to individual students that are represented within each slice of that pie. So as I'm looking at this pie chart, each color represents a group of students, and the cohort tracker can take you to all of the students' names and their transaction entries that we have within SchoolMax. Now let's take a look at the class of 2023. This class represents the students that are in their 3rd year of school. There's 68.2%, or 6,979 students that we would deem on track right now. And 15% are still 10th graders and 4% are still 9th graders. If we had a live cohort tracker demo, we could hover over each piece of this pie chart and it would give you the percentages that reference there. This is the first time where we're seeing the pandemic affect our students that are on track and off track significantly. However, leadership is working closely with schools to make certain the necessary academic programming is in place for success for all students, try to get them back on. And let's take a look at class of 2024. This represents those students that are in their 2nd year of school or are sophomore. Class of 2024. 69% of these students are currently on track, and 26.8%, which represents the green section, is off track right now. If I did look at this as a silver lining, the 366 students that have dropped out is much lower than we normally see at this point in time, representing 3.7% of our students. So we're going to continue to work closely to make certain that those students have what they need to get the green back on track. You see, I don't have a slide that represents the class of 2025 because they are first-time 9th graders. Therefore, they haven't exited 9th grade, can't determine on track versus off track for those students. The last few slides that I just discussed, we call this phase 1 of the cohort tracker. As you see, we're able to identify and place the students in the correct cohort of students. We can determine on grade level versus off grade level. We can determine how many have dropped out and which students have dropped out in which year. We have diploma status as well, and it updates nightly, which is a wonderful feature. I'm excited to talk about phase 2, which is the process we're working on now. It's currently in a development phase. It should be released at the beginning of the school year 22-23. It will provide credit count by total and category for individual students and groups. It will also include testing requirements and service learning hours. So in one place, we'll be able to really determine if a student is on track versus off. So I'm excited about this next phase of the work, and I look forward to sharing that with you down the road. Now I turn it back over to Dr. Thank you.
We're now ready for questions.
Board Member Jerome, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Dr. Strader, thank you so much for the presentation. Thank you for the presentation. So my first question is, I guess, more directed towards Dr. Golson, or Dr. Strader, you can answer as well. On what are the processes or ways PGCPS is currently trying to mitigate the graduation rates? I know we've seen that some of those numbers were stagnant for the past few years, but we didn't really see changes until this pandemic hit. And so what are some of the ways we're trying to mitigate that?
So the very first and immediate one is, if you look at the cohort tracker system, you'll see that there are students who are off track. And we're grateful that through the use of our ESSER funds, we were able to provide a K through 12 summer program for free for all students. And it wasn't just for credit recovery, though that is what those students would need to participate in. We also did it for acceleration as well. We're going to also offer that again this summer, and that'll be the next work session where Dr. Judy White will present around our summer program. K to 12, once again, also free. Transportation provided for in-person. We'll do virtual, in-person, and a hybrid structure, so that all of those students, which you don't have the luxury to see because of its personal information, is that, as Mr. Whittington shared, when you hover over each of those colors, it gives very specific names of students. So we know specifically that maybe Monica Golson needs to be in summer school because she may need to take Algebra 2 to get back on track. It's then our job to make sure that she's enrolled. We have a coach that's assigned to her to make sure that she's getting everything that needs to be done, so that then that she's back on track, and then now she's in the correct part of the pie for her cohort structure. That's just one of the many things.
Thank you. And Dr. Strader, is there any clarification in terms of how our cohort tracker is accounting for, I know recently for like the rates when it comes to HSA and SSL being waived these past year, how those numbers are being reflected?
So that's the effort for the Phase 2 piece, because in Phase 2, we have to include all the business rules that go into the decision-making of whether a student's actually able to graduate or not. So you are right, the state is in the process of changing the requirements. So that's what we need to program in the back end. And unfortunately, it's dependent on which grade level, when the student entered the cohort, and so on and so forth. So it's a very complicated engine that this thing's being built on.
Thank you.
Yes.
Vice Chair Williams.
Thank you. Dr. Strader, I appreciate, because I've seen the evolution of this data tracker come across the last, years before COVID. This tracker was started, so I'm just enjoying the evolution of this. The ability to attract individuals and cohorts to drill down to a specific person to say, this child needs help. And again, thank you for the clarification of how you come up with the total number of students that are included in the number so that we can come up with the percentage of graduation versus dropout. So when you spoke on a student leaving one school, going to another school, or leaving PGCPS and going to another school system, those that may drop out completely and those that unfortunately pass away. When you find that a student has done anything else other than dropped out, will our denominator decrease because we know that that student is now continuing education? Is that accounted for? If we have, because typically we have about 7,500 kids that graduate each year. And if we find that, 25 kids now have moved on to another school system or they're doing homeschooling, does that number of students that are in that pool decrease. Is that how you calculate that? How does it affect?
It does. So as long as the student's receiving educational services elsewhere, we would categorize that as a transfer. Transfer to homeschool, transfer out of state. Transfers will remove the students from the cohort, which that would actually impact the grad rate by elevating. The other codes, the withdrawal codes, those are the codes where we can't confirm the students receiving service. Those are the ones that remain. Those are the ones that continue to count against them. So those whereabouts unknown, drawn due to lack of interest, those are the ones that.
I just want to add, for those whereabouts unknown, that's important to us. That's why we're always looking for where those students are. So if they are in attendance today and leave and move to Wyoming on tomorrow, we still need to know that. Because then if not, if we can't track them and no parent communicates with us to say that they're in Wyoming, then we take the hit for that lack of communication. Because then we have to code them as whereabouts unknown.
Right.
And when they would transfer within the state can confirm that yes, Doug actually did transfer. If we say yes, Doug transferred to Anne Arundel County, they can check to confirm whether that is accurate or not.
Thank you for that. So the other part of this, before the data tracker, where you talk about the individual categories, if we looked at a student is falling in a category of multiple challenges, are we moving to, and maybe it's a different department, into targeting those individuals as they move into 9th grade to say, you are falling into 3 of these categories of challenge, so we're going to create a strategy to support that student that, you follow what I'm saying?
Yeah, actually, that's the student services portion of it. And a lot of times those students do. They might be chronic absenteeism. They might have a transient rate that's high, and they might fall in another category. So they're already identified as needing those supports before they even get to high school. Because then now you're getting ready to add 3 more layers: the academics, the assessment, and now the community service credit that you also got to jump through those hoops in order to graduate as well.
Right, and so I think because it's good to collect data and see it. It's what we use that data for to prevent or to increase our ability to, support those students. We know that certain kids, those that are coming into the system from another country, and they're in a community that is in poverty, and they, to be able to target those individuals with the support up front, we can then help move their future into something different than what is expected. So I appreciate that. The red versus the blue data that we showed, and I always think is very interesting when I talk to constituents about us meeting that target of the state, being the second largest district in the state, being that we have 1/6 out of the 24 districts of African American students. And we could see that data trend show that if we bump, they bump. If we bump the entire school system, our target now has moved a little bit. It might be just a little few points on the state, but we move. The ability to convey that information that we are moving that target away from us, I think is important to continue to show those graphs so that we can completely understand that our success, it's great, but sometimes it's a hindrance because our target moves. So I'll reserve the rest for round 2.
Board Member Boozer-Strother.
Thank you, Dr. Miller. Thank you so much for the presentation. I have a couple of questions. Can you talk a little bit of the breakdown of what the students that you referenced as 5th-year students, how they're accessing courses, like the different programmatic ways that they engage?
So the 5th year, the counts that we were looking at there, so the different programs, they are right now in the system as 12th graders. So they're continuing with their learning, they're in their coursework, they've gone through the process. One thing that we failed to mention for what Vice Chair Williams was sharing, part of the cohort, our stat days, our schools, our principals are dissecting this data, and they're going through and looking at what they can do for these particular students and assisting them getting through on track for graduation. So on track is that 4-year graduation rate, but it's equally as important for that 5th-year graduation rate. We are trying to ensure all of our students are getting through the system. So part of that 5th year, it's still going through, looking at those students, what is it they need? Dr. Goldston mentioned the summer programs, for credit recovery. What exactly is it? Is it student service, learning hours? What exactly is it to get the student through to assist? And so we actually do get credit for both the 4-year rate as well as the 5-year rate.
And those students could be in a day program, they could be in an evening program, or they could be in an alternative school location.
And is it about equal or like, I
No,
guess
it could be, they could be doing both. They could be
or on
doing
both,
day and
okay.
evening. Yep, they could be doing alternative and evening. They could do a combination, depending on how many credits they need, and where in what areas they need them in.
Okay, all right, thank you. And, there isn't too many times you show us data where I sort of feel like myself sink of like the shock of what we're seeing in 22 and 23. I mean, we are seeing 23 and 24, a complete social change. We are seeing that grade level is beginning to get significantly blurred. I mean, and we have discussed that there's a real social emotional component to being part of your grade. How are we going to manage that? How are we going to manage that it's okay because you've gone through a pandemic, it is okay that you are in 10th grade, but are we going to call you a 10th grader? Like what are the plans for that?
Yeah, so the state still has the identifiers of what determines going from matriculating from each grade level. So we can't deviate from that because that is what makes up that cohort model for a 4th year and a 5th year graduation student. I think what is important is that our community schools are great examples that we have to continue to provide wraparound services. It's more than just a student coming to school and doing their coursework because there's so much that goes into that. I think that was what we just spent an hour presentation showing, that mental health is just one of those components. We haven't spoken about food insecurity and what happens when the U.S. Department of Agriculture now requires us to use free and reduced meals applications again. Right now, we're doing universal feeding, but food and insecurity of food impacts a child's ability to learn daily. So those are just many of those other factors that are going to fall into that. But we won't be able to say, it's kind of fluid that you're here, let's see how many credits you can get, because still they will be in a cohort model, and we still will have to attribute to them from the time they come in until that 4th or 5th year cohort when they leave.
And I guess I'm asking is, would you propose another alternative to the state at this, like seeing this reality?
What ends up happening right now is that the blueprint for Maryland schools is really driving our accountability structure across the state. And while it is not embedded in there now, I doubt very seriously if there will be a change anytime soon. I'm sure it's not the answer you wanted, but it's the truth.
Yeah. Well, I hope we can keep talking about the social emotional component of this. Because there's also what's coming, the younger students coming behind, because I will throw out a data point that also was very difficult, was to receive the printed copy of the MCAP that my 6th grader brought home this week. And that, even though I think you all know my skepticism on the usage of that, it is the data point that the state judges us on, and these charts are just the beginning of this blurring of what grade you're in as you move through PGCPS. So I think it's really significant.
Board Member Valentine.
Thank you, and thank you all for your research, and more importantly, to all the educators, school leaders who actually do the work to ensure this happens on a regular basis. We're reporting on it, but they're doing the real work. A couple things just jumped out at me, particularly the drop in graduation rate From 2019 to 2020, I think on the surface, folks would probably say this is related to us closing schools during COVID, but we closed schools in March, which is about 2 months prior to that graduation. So I was curious whether you could explain that dramatic drop, because now as we're increasing, we're trying to get back to where we were pre-19 as far as the rate. So I'm just curious about that. Another thing jumped out, I think people have already mentioned, which is the graduation rate of African Americans in our district. And it's just ironic because, we've been having this conversation around parents who are moving to the DC area and choosing our district over other districts in the state of Maryland, but being very clear that when you enroll in our schools, particularly if you're African American, you have just as a chance of graduating on time as you would pretty much anywhere in the state. And so it's really important to understand just what being in a district like ours means for students who look like us and have teachers who look like them and school leaders and school counselors and all things that, dare I say, you get from historically black colleges like the one I attended, that people choose because your chance of doing well in this district is just as good, in some places probably better, than districts that aren't culturally competent and really advocating for students who look like them. The other thing I wanted to ask, particularly, I look at the data around dropout rates, and we have 15%, but then when you look at the gender, male, female, I saw the 19%. I'm just curious what the difference was, because you had, if you look at the rate on, I think it's slide 12, it was 11.57 for male, and then the difference, I think, is 19.1. So what's the 15-19 difference from slide 11 to slide 12? And then, I'm interested in seeing the graduation breakout by school model. One thing, again, since I've been on the board, is really just identifying that students just learn differently, and students are more likely to work harder when they're doing something they're really passionate about. And so we have a lot of choice here in our district, whether it be P-Tech, Science and Technology, CTE, P3, Charter, you name it. Do we have the rates of graduation for students who are in a program of choice within our district, and what that looks like? You already mentioned Academy of Health Sciences being 100%, but how do students in those programs compare to others? And if so, I'm of their mind, if it's work, let's replicate it. If it works, give other students the same opportunity to get into those programs. If it does work. And so, last thing I'll say, I know throughout COVID there was conversations around our grading policy, whether it be pass fail, whether it be allowing students to resubmit, and teachers giving students grace on certain assignments, and whether that was a contributing factor towards graduation. And if so, I'm all for it. This idea of being punitive and not allowing students to resubmit is one. I don't do it with my students at Maryland, and I don't think it should be done for my own children or any students. That's not how the world works. You go to work, you get an extension. You go to work, you tell a colleague, can I get an extra hour, extra day? And it's not as punitive. And I don't think our students should, particularly in this period of time, should be at a disadvantage because of that. So I'm saying a lot, but one, to what do we attribute the increase? And is it related to our grading policy and the grace that teachers give students to resubmit? Two, are we seeing a particular increase, particularly around some of our choice programs, CTE, some of the opt-in programs? And lastly, this point around the dropout rate, 15-19, like what's the number? Because I just want some clarification. Thank you very much.
So, several items. The first one is when you asked about school breakdown, I actually sent that to all board members when I first sent the results. So I think we can make sure we have them posted on our website as well. But you have that in the first email that I sent you announcing our increase. The second one was when we departed, it was March of 2020. And yes, we see a decline, and I can only attribute that really to many of us were really trying to figure out how to recover quickly from March to May. So my child is one of those who was in the class of 2020 who we left in March. We thought we'd come back in 2 weeks. And literally in 6 weeks, seniors were done. And if you recall, we did implement in our grading program a pass and an incomplete to try to salvage those students that we could. There were other districts that went to pass fail. But we did our very best to try to recover, and we added in an additional period where students could provide that makeup work. What we found is that some students thought that, okay, yeah, teachers are going to be lenient and let them go, and that was not the case. And so those students then had to recover those courses in the summer. But that was the immediate of us having to pivot quickly. When you go and you look at the 2020-2021 school year, while we were on virtual majority of that year, and even when we returned in April, many of our students opted, at least at the secondary level, not to return. By that point, our teachers had perfected online learning. Our principals could know where every child was. They knew how to get to them, communicate, and in some cases even went to their homes to make sure that they did what they needed to do to get to where we are for those graduation rates now. And then I made a note here for us to disaggregate the data for CTE.
And the 1950, for those two slides, I'm just curious.
Yeah, so slide 11, that's at the all student group, so that's 15% of all students. If you go to slide 12, that's splitting the population for males and females. So the male was 19%, females were 11%. So they're roughly 50% each, so the average you would expect to be about 15%, which is what's being reported on slide 11.
Thank you. Board Member Mickens Murray.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This presentation, I have a learning curve. I'm going to admit that, okay? But I'm not going to have you educate me tonight, okay? My question is, when did Prince George's County start the cohort tracker? What year? When?
We started the cohort tracker in September of this school year.
Okay, then that helps.
became
That
live,
helps a lot.
yes.
Because when I was on the board before, we were very concerned about losing ninth graders. So my questioning was going to be around that, but now it won't be. Like I said, I have a learning curve, so I need to really.
I can speak to ninth graders as well. We have another product called an early warning indicator report, which gives promotion probabilities for all of the incoming ninth graders. As well, we have promotion probabilities for 7th and 8th graders too.
Okay, so what I would be interested in maybe at the end of this school year is how many ninth graders did we lose? Because that seems to be a vulnerable cohort. So that's what registered in my head. Okay, so like I said, I have a learning curve. I will look at this in depth. You don't have to teach me tonight. And maybe the next time I'll have more in-depth questions. Thank you.
Adam F.
Thank you. Thank you for the report. I wanted to just get some clarity. So for the 1,200 projected dropout students, do you have data on the demographics of those students? Okay, but broken down by race. If you could send those to us, that would be great.
Sure.
And I guess my question is, are the 700 seniors that are part of this group that are still enrolled in school, are they using Edgenuity?
If they're in their day program, no. They're in front of a teacher. If they're in the evening program, they might not be. If they're in the alternative program, no.
So we're not using Edgenuity right now with the students that are at risk of failing?
If they're in the day program, no, because they're in front of a teacher. If they're in Croom or Tall Oaks or CBC, no. They have a teacher in front of them. If they're in our evening program, they may be.
Okay, so I guess my question is, it seems as though, what I'm hearing is that at the end of last year, students were in a hybrid model where they were receiving in-person instruction, online instruction, and we also see that schools are seeing this growth and this increase in their graduation rate. in the summer acceleration programs that also have a hybrid model where they're doing some in-person and some online. And so it just seems to me that wouldn't we want to continue using a program like CBC that is successful at using that type of hybrid model that has been proven to work with these types of students?
Yeah, we definitely are. It's, once again, that CBC program is just going to be at another location. We still are going to offer the same services. So we will continue that.
But we have 1,200 students that are not graduating. And so would it, to me, from a 30,000-foot view, why wouldn't we take a program like that and then use that, not only not consolidate it, but grow that program, put more resources into that program? The other point here is that, last year we talked about reclaiming students, and we talked about the TAWS program as a method to reclaim students, and thinking about the cost of when we lose a student each year. And we were told last year that the TAWS program, we have the CBC, so we don't need to use the TAWS program. But it seems like to me, if we are consolidating the CBC program and we're not using TAWS, how are we going to support these 1,200 students that are leaving every year? Why can't we leverage programs like these that have been successful to try to pull students back into the fold?
So first, let me say we never compared TAWS to CBC because they're two different programs.
I
TAWS
understand.
represents more of a CTE program, not what we're offering as CBC. And then second, what we are doing is expanding seats. So once again, if you go back and look at our alternative program redesign, you'll see that we are expanding. Not in just 9 through 12, but 6 through 12.
I don't think that I have the same view of what we've received as the plan as how you're explaining it. And so, I'm hoping that we will finally get a chance to sit down to talk about that. I also wanted to ask, when we talk about your cohort tracker, are you going to marry that tracker with the response to intervention tracker that you have developed?
Yeah, they're two totally different systems the way they stand right now. So the cohort tracker is really looking at the requirements specific to graduation and understanding student status for that piece. That's the way we have it scoped out now and with the funds that we have available to us.
It might be worth considering using some of those interventions that could possibly be precursors to someone dropping out, like truancy, literacy, behavior, those types of indicators that could be leveraged to support in the cohort tracker. And then just, lastly, I just can't not say, colleague Valentine, with all due respect, you're saying if something is working for students of this demographic, why change it? I can't help but say we have a school right now that is doing this work with this population. And I'm just trying to understand, how can we expand and build upon that good work? So.
I just wanted to add, actually, what you referenced for RTI is in our early warning. Remember Adam Stafford? What you referenced in the RTI is in the early warning system that Anthony Whittington referenced.
Board Member Boozer Strother.
Thank you. Well, I did want to take a moment to congratulate Northwestern High School and High Point High School. Of course, these majority of these students live in District 3, so that's a lot to be proud of. But of course, the total percentages, obviously we need more work. We've talked about this a lot, and the continued services for these high school students. And I did want to ask around the comprehensive support and improvement, can you remind us that these, there's special funds that are to help in this situation, but once you reach a 70% or higher graduation rate, do the funds diminish? How does the program, where do the funds and programming go once you're actually successful?
So the state is defining what that process is going to look like moving forward. They're outlining right now the timeline for the next wave of designations for those schools and how they would off-ramp those schools that have now no longer designated as the CSI schools. So there's still much talk continuing on this. The way the budgets are aligned right now, we get off to a late start every time we begin our efforts in working with these schools. So there's still funds available to carry them, but I still don't know definitely how long that's going to last or what that exit's going to look like.
Thank you so much.
Vice Chair Williams.
Thank you. My question is around the 5-year adjusted cohort and how it relates to the 4-year cohort. I know we have 2 designations, but do they somehow come back together to say that that group that started in 9th grade together, if they graduate in that 5th year, does it circle back to become incorporated as a part of that graduation, or does it always stand alone?
So if you go out to the Maryland Report Card website, you would see, in this case, like our 4-year adjusted cohort is 77.6%. If we go to this time next year, you would see both the 4-year rate and the 5-year rate available for this class of first-time 9th graders that full year. So what you would see instead of 77.6, I mentioned before that there's roughly 7% of the kids that are still continuing on. So you would hope to see 77.6 plus that 7% of those other kids to show what the 5-year graduation rate would be. That would be the most ideal situation.
Thank you for that. I just wondered. On slide number 17, for example, there was a pie chart that you had that I believe it's for the 2023 school year, class of 2023. So not the kids that are considered seniors today, kids that would be considered seniors next year. But you have here 12th grade at 174. Is that, what does that mean? How do you explain those kids if they're in 11th grade this year?
Yeah, those would be your accelerated students.
Oh, okay.
That have met the requirements to be categorized as a 12th grader for this year.
So in the class that are supposed to be juniors this year, we have 174 kids that have taken enough credits to be considered seniors.
That's correct.
It's awesome. Being one that graduated at 16, I always like to see these kids who get out of school early. So there was one thing that was explained in the report about updated nightly. What does that mean? What are we talking about? What is updated nightly?
Great question. Updated nightly means the cohort tracker is fed from or connected to our SchoolMax system. So when an entry occurs, for example, if a student leaves and is coded as a transfer, that night automatically update for that particular school. So if I was attending Central High School and now I transferred to a different school, the next day you go into the cohort tracker, my name will not appear for Central High School because it's updated from the SchoolMax system. That's what I mean when I say updated nightly.
Is that also included? Are you including grades in that as well, or just at the end of the quarter when grades are?
In phase 2, our goal is to provide credit. So you'll be able to look at a student and determine how many credits they have currently versus how many credits they need. In that analytics tab that I showed you with all the pie charts, then you'll be able to really determine who's on track versus who's off track and the number of credits those individuals need. As far as grades right now has not been placed in phase 2, just what it takes for the requirements to graduate. The community service hours will be in place, the testing requirements, and then all of the 21 credits they need to graduate from school.
Thank you so very much.
You're quite welcome.
Board Member Valentine.
Really quickly, Dr. Golson, you mentioned you shared with us graduation rates by all the schools. My question was particularly programs within schools. And so there's some schools, say, like I said, say Oxon Hill High School and you have the Science and Tech program, or Douglas High School, you have P-Tech, I think P3 at Flowers. So, but then also CTE, also, I mean, you name it. There's so many options that our parents have. Is a child more likely to graduate on time if they get into one of those programs or not? That's my question.
Dr. Strader's taking notes, we got you. Dr. Strader's taking notes, we got you.
Additional question? Again, Grader Whittington, Dr. Whittington. Very insightful information. Very. Thank you very much. Now, before we move to 5.0, I have to circle back to an item that I did not take a vote on, and that was we needed to vote to have Curtis Valentine serve on the OBAFA committee and remain on the Academic Achievement Committee until the board has a full complement of members to fill those vacancies. May I have a motion? Second. Been moved and second that board member Curtis Valentine will serve on the OBAFA committee and remain on academic achievement until the board has a full complement of members to fulfill these vacancies. Now we can move to new business on the first reader. Dr. Golson.
Dr. Miller, did we vote on that?
I went real fast. It's 10 o'clock. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? The motion carries. Thank you, Board Member Valentine. Now to new business. Dr. Golson, please introduce item 5.1.
Item 5.1 requires board approval of the 2022-2023 Prince George's County Public Schools calendar.
All board members have had an opportunity to look at this calendar and review it. May I have a motion to approve item? May I have a second? Thank you. It has been moved and seconded that we accept it as a first reader. All in favor? Any nays? Any abstentions? Motion carries to approve item 5, the calendar, as first reader. With that, any follow-up items will be posted on board docs. Now, a motion to confirm actions taken in executive session. You didn't want me to read them for the record? I think I'll read them for the record. To receive a report from the CEO regarding the administration of the school system, to discuss personnel matters regarding the appointment, employment, and removal of certain employees, to discuss pending or potential litigation, to consult with counsel to obtain legal advice on legal matters, to discuss an investigative proceeding on actual or possible criminal conduct, to receive a report on collective bargaining negotiations, to discuss requests for proposal RFP for legal services, to approve cases dismissed by the ethics panel, and that's it. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Any abstentions? The actions taken in executive session are confirmed. Now, may I have a motion to adjourn?
Second.
It's been moved and second. Any discussion? Good night. Thank you, everyone. Dr. Golson, can I see you before you leave? Are you in a hurry to leave?
Aye.
Aye.